All right, good morning, depending on where you are, and welcome back to the NNP Symposium at Central States. We're going to kick off today with John Baumgart, who'll be talking about VAMs, so Morgan Dollar Collectors, welcome. John is the owner of Variety Slabbing Service, the former president of the Society of Silver Dollar Collectors, executive director of the Institute for Silver Dollar Education and Research, administrator of VAM World, and the current curator of the VAM catalog. So I will get out of the way and let John take it away.
Well, thank you for the introduction. You took care of one of my slides for me, so now we can run this a little bit shorter. So welcome to this class. This is a gentle introduction to VAM collecting, and basically, I'm going to spend about 45 minutes, an hour, and we'll get you some basic information about what VAMs are, how we collect them, how to identify some of them. Nothing very in depth, but enough maybe to whet your appetite or to get a couple basic questions answered about what VAM collecting is all about. So again, the overview of this class we'll go through what's a VAM, why we have VAMs, why there's so many of them. Different ways of collecting them, and then there's actually some benefits to collecting them that I think are kind of important. So as I was introduced so nicely here, I've served as the president of SSDC. I've owned Variety Slabbing Service, which is a service that I do for attributing coins. Started out attributing just Morgan and Peace dollars for people, and I do other varieties now as well. I teach the Morgan Dollar Investing and Collecting class at the ANA Summer Seminar. And if you're interested in that, more than just a general introduction to VAMs, you've got a couple days left to sign up, and that's being held this June in Colorado Springs. It's a fun time, pretty intense class, 4 days, lots of hands-on stuff. You get to play with a lot of coins. Starting last year, I took over the maintenance of the VAM catalog from Leroy Van Allen. Leroy's still alive and kicking. He's almost 90 years old now, but now I'm doing the cataloging for that. Also administer the VAM World website, and this new organization, Institute of Silver Dollar Education and Research, that Michael Fay and Jeff Oxman and I are involved with, which is basically trying to continue the research that Leroy has been doing on VAMs in a more organization rather than an individual basis. Okay, so the first thing that is important to learn about VAMs is what a VAM is, and equally important is what a VAM is not, because VAM is used as a noun in U.S. numismatics, and people don't understand what that noun means. And really it's a abbreviation for Van Allen and Malus. And those are the two researchers that wrote the comprehensive encyclopedia for Morgan and Peace dollars, starting back in 1965 when they worked together. And they used their initials to catalog all the different die pairs of Morgan and Peace dollars that they found, much as Al Overton catalog bust half dollars, and Sheldon cataloged old big copper large cents, and all the other letters and names you see associated with other different types. So VAM is simply the abbreviation that's used for the cataloging system. And the VAM catalog attempts to catalog a discernibly unique die marriage for Morgan Peace dollar. In many cases, you can't tell one die pair from another, so those are cataloged together, usually as VAM1, because there's nothing interesting about them. But every other VAM number in the catalog represents a specific die marriage, and some collectors are studying very specific dates and all the die marriages in those dates, and gives us a lot of information about what there was there. What a VAM is not a striking error. So something like a lamination or struck through grease, a railroad rim, all these sorts of things that happen while the coin is being struck, those are not VAMs. Those are simply striking errors. So anything like that is not cataloged. by itself in the VAM catalog. Now, since it's a silver dollar, it has a VAM number. So it's a Morgan dollar die pair with a clip. Well, it can be VAM 6 with a clip, but it's still VAM 6. So it's the one that doesn't have a clip. It doesn't refer to die varieties of any other type. So if you know, one of the things I've heard is I've got this Franklin half dollar with a VAM on it. It says, no, you don't. You have Franklin half dollar. It doesn't have a VAM on it because the coins don't have VAMs on them. The coins are VAMs, like in the catalog. They may have features of a die variety on them, but those features are not called VAMs. And then each coin has only one VAM number. Sometimes I've heard, you know, I have people ask the question, well, I've got this coin, it's VAM 2, and it's also got VAM 5, and it's got VAM 46. No, it's one of those. Or it's a new one that hasn't been cataloged that has this combination of features. So the VAM is the die pair, not the features. And again, only Morgan and Peace dollars have VAM numbers. So why do we have VAMs? Well, there's a lot of different things that go into creating the final working die for any series. And for VAMs, what's been cataloged is hubbing issues, things like double dies. So when the die is created, a silver dollar die would be hubbed, so be struck in a metal press with a hub of the positive design, and that design would be sunk into the die steel. And that would have to happen about between 7 and 10 times for a Morgan dollar for that design to be brought up fully so that it could be used in production and strike coins that had complete detail on it. So right there, when you see that something is happening 7 to 10 times, you have opportunities for misregistration. The die shifts or something shifts or rotates or tilts or whatever, and you get all these types of double dies. And that's the most popular type of die variety across any modern and not so modern U.S. coin is double dies. And one of the most famous ones being the 1955 double die cent, which has a very, very strong spread for the doubling. But as you've seen a while, the 1955 cent is not the strongest double die in U.S. coins. That honor goes to a couple different silver dollars. Also, when a design is first created, it's not known how well it's going to hold up on a die in production at full speed. So the first year, typically they'll start modifying the design a little bit, making adjustments. So for first years of production, for 1878 Morgan dollars, you see a lot of subtle design changes, and those things come across. I mean, they're in the red book for silver dollars. You see reverse of 78, reverse of 79, 7 tail feathers, 8 tail feathers. All these design changes, those are things we look at when we're cataloging what the VAMs are. So design changes like that. There's a couple other subtle design changes that happen throughout the production of Morgan dollars as well. And one big one in Peace dollars when they went from the high relief to the lower relief from 1921 to 1922. And then a couple other small modifications on the reverse of Peace dollars. There's also things like date and mint mark issues. So before dates were part of the hub, so the thing that would make the dies, the dates would be punched into working dies individually by the engraver. So you could get repunched dates where you'd have one blow didn't quite do it enough, and then so they'd punch it again and have a little bit of misregistration there. I mean, it's a very precise punching you have to get the date sunk correctly into the die. And if there's a little bit of misregistration between blows, you can get a repunched date. Or if they put it in kind of the wrong place, then you could see remnants of the date where it doesn't belong. You can get overdates. There's a couple popular overdates in the Morgan dollar series, and there's overdates in other series as well, where there's a perfectly good die that's partially made or completely ready, and it's past the end of the year, so they have to redate the die. They can repair the die and then sink a new date into it. There's a couple of those in the Morgan dollar series that we'll touch on later. over mint marks. So if there's a die that's been produced for a specific mint and they in Philadelphia and they change their mind, they can punch a different mint mark in it. All the mint marks are added to dies in Philadelphia. So the engraving department there will punch the mint marks in it to send them to the branch mints. The branch mints don't add their own mint marks. Those are done in Philadelphia. So that's the opportunity for that to happen. And those are very small punches and they can be repunched too. You can see S over S over O. The CC has all sorts of doubling on it frequently. And the other thing that they've done is going along with the design changes for the hubs, the design change for the mint mark punch can change as well. They can make it larger, they can make it smaller. And we get different sizes of mint marks. And there's some years that have multiple sizes of mint marks. And so each of those are cataloged differently. And some years have just one size of a mint mark. So there's no looking at the mint mark to determine from the size which VAM it is. There's other stuff like finishing the dies. So in 1878, when they're first getting the production up and running, they had actually did some hand retouching in the engraving department in Philadelphia to add some detail to the dies. So someone in the engraving department took a graver and added some feathers to the eagle. There's other retouching that was done in San Francisco that I'll touch on a little bit later for dies when they polished them too much and had to add some detail back. Die gouges. There's some varieties that have big lines that are in the middle of nowhere that just don't belong to the design, but it was the die got a big scratch in it, and that scratch in the die shows up as a raised line on the coins. Dies also become damaged while they're being used. So one of the very popular things for people to look at is die clashing. So when a coin is made, the planchet sits on the anvil die, the hammer die comes down on it and stamps a coin. If there's a misfeed of some sort and there's no planchet there, the hammer die comes down on the anvil die, and the softer of the two will receive some design transfer from the other one. If they're both the same hardness, then they'll both receive about the same amount of design from each other. But that design is now on the opposite die and subsequently on every coin that die produces. So we see these marks showing up on the coins like that. And as dies are used, they deteriorate. So you can get die cracks and die breaks. The dies can be cracked from the time that they're put into production, because all these hubbings that have to bring up the design, they can lead to a cracked die and get little cracks in it. And then when it's used, it's pounding and pounding and pounding 80 times per minute. And it can start falling apart and you get little pieces of die breaking out, and that shows up as lumps on the coin, and people find those interesting. Very dramatic ones, if a big piece of the die falls out, you get what's called a cut error, and you get this big section of the coin that's basically the design is missing, and there's a big lump on there instead. And those are extremely rare Morgan dollars. Another interesting type of damage is when a die collapses, and that doesn't happen very often. It happens with dies that are too soft to be used adequately. So the dies start being used, and all the pressure is too much for the die because it wasn't hardened correctly, and it starts collapsing on itself, and that produces some interesting effects that I'll illustrate later. So let's take a look at some of these things I've been describing here. We'll start with double dies. So as I was saying, there's 7 to 10 hubbings required to finish a Morgan dollar die or a peace dollar die. And if you get a misregistration, you can get a strong doubling on this. And as you see on the what do they see right now online? I have to ask. They see that on the screen. See it on the screen. Yes. Okay. So what kind of point with my finger? You can go up there and point with your finger, or there is a laser pointer we can use on the computer. I'll point with my finger so they can see me. So as you see here, there's the profile of Liberty here. The lips are doubled very strongly, and the nose is doubled, the chin is doubled. There's things doubled all over this design. And this is called the hot lips because of the design. Received a nickname, which is quite the honor for a VAM, I guess. And this is actually not really a super rare variety in low grade. They're not hard to find in fine or VF. If you want one that's almost uncirculated, I think this is an AU coin shown here, they start getting really expensive. And there's only maybe 2 or 3 known that are uncirculated. And there you're talking about easily a 5-figure coin. So an 1888 that's uncirculated is $50. An 88 hot lips like this that's uncirculated is going to be 20,000. And it's going to be a low uncirculated grade. It's not going to be a real high grade. And this here is a piece dollar with some pretty spectacular doubling also. And this obverse die was used with 2 different reverses. For people who like to collect inexpensive double dies, the VAM 3 is a very easy to find, somewhat common 1934D piece dollar variety. You won't pay much of a premium for it, and you get this spectacular doubling here. There's only supposed to be 1 ray here in the tier, right there and right there, not 2, with such a big separation. So these pictures show the 2 biggest double dies in U.S. coinage. It's a bigger spread, bigger absolute spread than the 55 double die set. This obverse was used with 2 different reverses, and one reverse has a medium-sized D mint mark, the other has a very small D mint mark. So this goes back to the mint mark size also being important for determining a variety. The small mint mark is pretty rare. The medium-sized mint mark is not so rare, so that one's more easy to find. Okay, so double die is not machine doubling. One of the mistakes that I think everybody makes, and it's part of just the process of learning what this stuff is what is a double die? Well, as I explained, double die is when the hub hits the die with misregistration, and that causes a design to be doubled in the die, and every coin it produces is doubled. Machine doubling happens when the planchet comes into contact with the die twice somehow. The die bounces, or the planchet bounces, or it's ejected funny and it kind of gets smeared by the die. And what you see is it looks like doubling. You see this around this 2 on this piece dollar, this really broad doubling here, but that was made by the coin being hit by the die twice, not by a double die. So this kind of doubling is not worth a premium at all until you get like it's double struck way off center or something like that, which is a major striking error. But this is not a premium doubling. Morgan Dow, you see this doubling up here on top of RIC in America is also machine doubling. So one of the ways, there's a couple ways to learn what machine doubling looks like compared to a double die. The machine double part always looks kind of squashed. It's got a different shape. If you look closely at the top of the eye here, this double part, it doesn't have the same shape as the top. It's rounded and it's squished, spread out a little bit, flattened. It's also, if you look at the width of the 2 here, it's actually it becomes smaller. The main part of the 2 is a little bit narrower here where it was hit twice, because the double die actually kind of flattened what was already struck and didn't add more details to it. So that's when you have raised design elements, that's how you can tell the difference between those. But it does take practice. People get it wrong all the time as they're learning this. And yeah, it just takes a lot, looking at a lot of coins that are true double dies and are not double dies. Ask a lot of questions and you'll learn. Okay, so I talked about design changes, and first year of coinage design, is common for the design to be modified and changed a little bit. So in 1878, they changed the reverse 3 times, or 2 times, 3 different reverses. They changed it twice. So there's the 8-tail feather reverse that you see on the left, the 7-tail reverse, where the top arrow of the fletch, the top feather of the arrows is parallel to the rest of them, and the 7-tail reverse of 79 which is slanted. So this reverse, they finally settled on this in June of 1878 to be the one that would be used through 1904, with only one very minor modification that they made on the reverse in 1900. And then 1921, they had to come up with a new design because the models had been destroyed. There were no more models left. They couldn't make the dies anymore from anything. So they copied a coin, essentially a mint-made counterfeit, if you will. They copied I think an 1878 silver dollar and made a very crude version of the design. If you look at it closely, it doesn't look much like anything else. If you look at a 1921 silver dollar, the design's a little clumsier. It's very low relief. It's not as attractive, and it's kind of the redheaded stepchild of the Morgan dollar series. Well, it was also 17 years after they stopped making the rest of them, so they have a little bit of. I'll give them some leeway for destroying the models, but they shouldn't have destroyed the models. Okay, I spoke about overdates earlier. So the two overdates that you see in VAMs are in 1880 and 1887. And they're for a couple different reasons. In 1880, part of the date was still in the hub, so they didn't punch the entire date into the hub, and they had working dies that had the 7 still present, and they had to repair those dies and punch an 80 into it. And so you see an 18 and an 80 on these dies that don't quite match each other, and this is because the date was partially in the hub and partially not. So many working dies, and we don't know how many, were repaired. They would basically fill in the 7 and the 9 that were present on the die, polish it, repunch the entire date, 1880, giving you a strong 1-8 and a slightly weaker 8-0 sometimes. And sometimes the repair of getting rid of the 7 and the 9 wouldn't hold, and they would see part of the 7 remaining under there. So these ears you see on top of the 8 in this 1880 VAM6, that's 8/7, very popular 1880 Philadelphia variety, and every mint for 1880 has 8/7 or 80/79s available. The most prominent ones are the Carson City ones, and there's a lot of 80/79 varieties in there, and there are no Carson City dollars that don't show overdates, and some show them stronger than others. So I'm guessing they just gave Carson City the worst dies of 1880 and told them, here, make coins. No one's going to see them anyway. We just have to coin some silver. And then again in 1887, there's a couple of 7/6 varieties. You see this little curve underneath the 7. That's part of a 6 for the 1887 VAM2, and there's also one 7/6 for 1887-0. All these are actually in the Red Book, and they're pictured there too. They've been known and popular for a long time, and the prices on them for the 7/6 varieties have good premiums on them, and those are well known in price guides. So repunch dates and mint marks are a little bit different. Those are happening all at the same time that the die is being finished. So it's not they're taking an old die and adding a date to it or adding a mint mark to it. They're finishing the die, they're punching the date on it, and they get the date shifted or they get the mint mark shifted. So what you see on the date here on the 99, you see this curve over the 9 there. You see some curves here. That's where they moved the punch a little bit between blows, and they got a double date there. Nothing else on the obverse we doubled because the date punching happens separately from the hubbing. So the hub hits the coin 7-10 times, bring up the design. There's no date on it yet. Then it goes to the date puncher guy. He punches the date in it, and so you can see different types of doubling on the date than you do on the hub or on the design that came from the hub. And that can also be if you see the same doubling on the date and on the rest of the design, that could also be a sign that you're looking at machine doubling, especially in mint mark, because mint mark also is added later. If the mint mark is doubled the same way that this ribbon is doubled or this D is doubled, that's probably machine doubling. In this case, we have the S that was first, it was punched horizontally. So there's this serif of the S is right here. And right here, you can kind of see this stroke of the S here. It was punched horizontally, fixed it up a little bit, repunched it correctly. And so now we have this nice 1895 S VAM4, very collectible. Since 1895 S is a tough date, there's not a real huge VAM premium on this because it's already an expensive coin. So if you're looking for an 1895 S for your Morgan dollar collection, why not look for this one? It might cost you a little bit more, but it's a lot more interesting than one that doesn't have a repunch mint mark like that. And I think it's the only one that is a horizontal mint mark that's really easy to see. That's underlying the main one. So there's a couple dates that have over mint marks where they took a die that was originally intended for one mint, changed the mint mark for another mint. So 1882, they did that with 3 different reverse dies that were intended for San Francisco. They repaired the S mint mark on it and punched an O instead and sent them to New Orleans. For 1900, different story. The CC dies they had came back from the Carson City Mint after they had closed. They've been closed since 1893, and they were able to repurpose those dies 7 years later for New Orleans by, fixing the CC a little bit and punching an O on it. So you see 2 different types of over mint marks. Those are also in the red book. They're very popular. There's 3 different reverse dies for the O over S, and there's 4 for the O over CC, I believe. There's times where they changed mint mark sizes, sometimes intentionally, sometimes accidentally. And when they did it accidentally, like in 1899 and 1903, they used the wrong punch for Morgan dollars. So they used this very small O punch in 1899 for a few different reverse dies. And in 1903, they used a small S, I think that was intended for Barbara Porter on the reverse. And for these 2 years, though these both carry premiums. Other years that have different mint mark sizes, 1880, it has different O size. They've got a small micro O like this and a regular size O. None of them are really rare because of the mint mark sizes in 1880. So micro O mint mark for 1880 is no big deal. 1879, 1879, 1880, they also were changing the size of the S mint mark. There's a very large S mint mark on some 1880s. There's a very large O mint mark on some 1879s. And none of those are particularly rare. But for 1899 and 1903, they're more scarce. Also 1888, there's some slightly different mint marks that are sizes that are more scarce. So die retouching. So San Francisco was notorious for doing this. They would polish the dies when they were getting ready to use them. And polish them, and they're basing down is what the term was. And what that meant was that they polished them too much and they started to remove some of the design elements. And on the right-hand side here, you see what they did to add some feathers back, that someone took a graver and just went put a whole bunch of lines on the wing. And so we call that the spaghetti wing variety because there's spaghetti all over the eagle's wing. It's a very interesting variety. You can see it without a glass very well. And it carries a premium in uncirculated grades and even in circulated grades. The thing is, San Francisco Mint was not supposed to do that. There was a letter discovered from Snowden, who was the mint superintendent in 1883, and he was basically, writing a very polite, scathing letter referring to this basting out that San Francisco did that caused them to have to re-engrave detail into dies. And he didn't see it in Morgan dollars. He saw it in $5 and $10 gold pieces first. And it was very subtle re-engraving of the scroll work around "In God We Trust" that he noticed. But that was nothing compared to what you see on some of the dollars here. If you look at a lot of the 1878 S varieties on VAM World, you will see that there's a lot of retouched dies. There's what are called acid treated dies, where they actually took nitric acid and used that to kind of fill in polished areas and make them look like they weren't polished out. And so there's all sorts of crazy stuff happening in 1878. to the reverse dies, especially in San Francisco. And they were scolded for that in 1883, and they kept up the practice into 1885. So they ignored them for a while, and I think maybe someone was fired and they stopped doing it in 1886. Now, Philadelphia was where the engraving department was done. So they were allowed to do this, and they did do this in 1878 with the 8 tail feather designs. So these feathers that you see here below the main wings, these little feathers here, those weren't on the original dies. So the engraver carefully added those feathers. And there's 41 die pairs for 1878 8 tail feather. And most of the reverses have different engraving on them. Some of them have almost no engraving, but most of them have something else. So this is a very important feature to look at on 8 tail feather dollars to start figuring out which VAM is this. Okay, die gouge, so damage to the die. So this could happen either while the die was being finished before it was ever used, or it could happen while it was in the press. So there's on the left side, you see this big bar that comes down from the bottom of the fletching into the wreath. That's the 1890 cc VAM4 tail bar. So there's a big bar there, and that we don't know of that die ever not having that gouge on it. And there's many others that we also assume have gouges on them that came with the die. They were mishandled, or something happened somehow while it was being hubbed, while it was being handled, before it was hardened, and they got a big gouge on it somewhere. And then all coins produced with that die have that gouge on it. One of the interesting things that happened in 1921 in San Francisco was this other die gouge, and this is what we call the thorn head. There's a big spike sticking out of Liberty's head on the obverse die. And there's several different stages of this. This happened while the coin was in the press, while the die was in the press. Through some research, we found the initial state of this die had no gouges on it. It was used with a different, I think it was used with a different reverse die first. And then eventually it ended up with this die pairing that over time, the die in the press kept getting gouged over and over again. And there's one after another where the gouge shows up, and then you later see that they stop the presses and they polish this gouge out, and there's no gouge there, and this design's weaker. And then you see the gouge show up somewhere else, kind of the same shape on the die, and then that gouge goes away. And then the third gouge showed up, and then that one went away, and then it went away a little bit more. And then finally another one showed up, and that's when they stopped repairing the die. So there's a total of, by now, I think it's over 12 different stages of these gouges coming and going on this same die. And there's people that are, their collecting focus is the best possible set of all 12 stages of this one die pair of Morgan dollars. So if someone's a Morgan dollar specialist, you know, you see, well, how much of a specialist are you? Well, I only collect one die pair of 1 year. I have 12 coins in my collection. It's better than anybody else's. And that's a very impressive collection, you know, in my eyes, because it shows really the whole life of this die. And then actually did continue, the obverse, I think, was also used before this die pair. So it's pretty impressive collection. So clash dies, these are quite popular because you see, you know, parts of the design that are on the other side of the coin. And for me, the stronger they are, the better they are. I mean, some people like them no matter how strong they are, but the ones that I really like are so strong that, you know, you don't need a magnifying glass to see it. This letter E under the eagle's tail feathers, and you can see parts of other letters too. This comes from the incuse Liberty on the headband of Liberty on the obverse. This area here, this is an N, and this is part of an I from the word in, from In God We Trust, on the reverse that shows up in front of Liberty's neck. And this clash is so strong that it distorted the neckline like this, and really ruined this obverse die. So the obverse die was quite a bit softer than the reverse die in this case. So who was the first to discover some of these things? Well, a couple of years ago, up until a couple of years ago, we weren't sure who first discovered the VAM 1A, which is the class E under the tail feathers. The collector first found it, but as of 2021, now we are showing that the person that first found it was the director of the Mint in September of 1891. So this letter turned up in the archives of the National Archives Record Administration box of letters from the Treasury Department that Roger Burdett, who also did talk here earlier, has been going through and finding cool stuff. And this is one of the things he found. And it's basically a strongly worded letter to the superintendent of the Mint saying, how dare you let this happen? Don't let it happen again, but return this coin to me after you take a look at it. So I don't know if the director wanted the sample to keep for himself or if it was to be returned and destroyed. This was from a special assay, so they're either kind of looking at the coins that were being made by the mints for kind of a quality check, and they found this coin. So this letter produced a lot of excitement for VAM collectors a couple of years ago when it surfaced. Die breaks. Die breaks are also a very popular thing to see on coins that have been made with damaged dies. The biggest die break most popular die break for the Morgan dollars is the 1888 O Scarface. There's a break that starts at the rim and gradually grows and grows and grows and goes all the way across the coin, across, in the field, across Liberty's cheek, neck, down into the hair. And the farther this break goes into the hair, the more valuable the coin is. And these coins are often found, they're usually found in MS-62. I mean, they have a funny look to them because of the die break. And they're always MS-62, no matter if it's a real early die stage or if it's later die stage. And the later die stages on circulated coins are several $1,000s for the late die stage. The early die stages can be found with a little bit of attentive looking, and they really don't carry a premium if the crack doesn't really go into to come close to Liberty's portrait. Kind of another one on the peace dollar side. Peace dollars they don't have as much doubling, or there's no repunch dates on a peace dollar. There's no repunch mint marks on a peace dollar, but they do have cool die breaks. So this is the mustache variety where Liberty now has this big droopy mustache from a die break that's in the middle of the die. On Morgan dollars, usually the dies break on the peripheral part, and you'll see stars connected to each other or lettering connected. Once in a while, you see something coming in from the edge. We call it a radial die break because it follows the radius of the coin. Peace dollars, when they get exciting die breaks, they happen right in the middle of the coin. Very, very seldom are they starting around the edge. They're in the middle of the design. So you get this mustache look. You get another one has a big scar down the cheek. Another one has extra hair because there's a big die break in the hair. There's some that have breaks across the eagle's feathers. So peace dollars, if you like die breaks, look at peace dollars for die breaks. So die collapse. So if the die is too soft and it sinks while it's being struck, while it's being used, you get this funny halo that shows up around the design elements. This halo is like a trace that's sunken on the coin, so it's raised on the die, and you see the field is kind of crumbled around that because the field sunk. So that the die is work hardened more where the design is, so it's a little bit stronger than the fields, which will collapse. So you see this funny design outline here. Crumbled stars on the obverse happens a lot. So these dies tended not to be used very long because they were too soft to use. They would use them and they see this problem, this quality issue, and they take it out, put a new die in. And there's die uses charts that Roger found at in the archives that show reasons for dies being pulled from use. And I transcribed this here. So the blue arrow is pointing to a specific die that was used up because it was too soft after 16,000 coins were produced. So that's a very low production for Morgan dollar dies. The average was around 120 to 150,000. It went up slightly as it got later and later. There's some San Francisco issues in 81 and 96 that we know of that had more than 600,000 coins used, struck with a specific die. So they tried to use dies as much as they could because they're expensive. But if they're too soft and they couldn't strike coins, there's no reason to use them because it wasn't giving a quality product. So they stopped producing coins with that die. So those are different types of things that lead us to call something VAM something or other. And now, how do you collect them? Well, the entire VAM catalog has an uncollectible number of varieties, as far as I'm concerned. It's over 5,000. I don't have an exact count. I should know it. I can look it up, but 5,000, 6,000. Most of them are very mundane, minor shifts in where the date position is or the mint mark position, very minor doubling, or a die pair that's been identified to be different from another die pair, but both of them are almost the same and kind of boring. Mundane, not valuable, not rare. That takes care of over 4,000 of them. So you got a much smaller amount to look at. There's two collectors that are trying to collect them all. I think they're crazy. So, but they know who I am and they appreciate me giving them a shout out for being crazy, I hope. So in 1996, the strategy for how to focus people on collecting VAMs was to get them looking at a small list. Just, okay, forget the big catalog, which in 1996 only had 2,000 or 3,000 in it. And let's take 100 coins that are interesting, kind of cool. Some of them are pretty rare and valuable. Some of them are not so rare. So you can find some easily to get yourself kind of used to looking at these coins. And a couple of them are going to take a lot of work to find. And that's produced the top 100 list in 1996. And that became a very popular way to collect VAMs, and it still is. Because it gets you focusing on looking at, okay, just forget the big catalog, look at this manageable number of coins. And the top 100 list was created for that reason, just to focus people, get them to start a VAM collection and see if they enjoyed it. Enough people enjoyed it where more of these chase lists came out. There's a hot 50 list, which is 50 more coins. Okay, you've got those 100. Here's 50 more that are pretty cool or been discovered, but after the 100 that are rare, or cool and rare, or cool and not rare. Peace dollars got in on the action a couple years later with the top 50 peace dollar varieties. A lot of these massive interior die breaks, some double dies. Other lists follow. So the hit list 40, the elite 30 peace dollars. There's a whole bunch of chase lists that we have for dollars to make VAM collecting more simplified and approachable to someone who's just curious. What can I get into looking for this? And having to look at a 5,000 variety catalog is kind of daunting. Well, here, look at this little book that has 100 in it instead, and start there. Also, people have specialized on a specific date and mint, and 1878 being the first year of production where there was a lot of changes made, is a very popular year for people to collect. So we'll take a look at why 1878 is so popular. So the 8 tail feather series is probably the king of series within the Morgan dollar series. There's 41 different die pairs. They're produced starting March 11th, 1878 into April of that year. There's no clean cutoff for when they transition from one to another because they have a box of dies and they're just using them as they put them in the press. So they needed to produce 2 million coins per month of silver dollars. That was part of the legislation, the Bland-Allison Act, to produce these dollars. They produced 2 million per month was what they're supposed to do. So they were under a lot of pressure to produce lots of coins, of a coin that was designed by someone who had not designed a circulating coin for the U.S. Mint before. They had lots of failure of the dies. They had lots of doubling and repunching and retouching and repairs. So the 1878 8 tail feather dies are a bit of a mess if you look at them under magnification. There's lots of things that went wrong and got fixed. And as variety collectors, we think that's pretty cool. So that's why people gravitate towards 1878. They eventually did reach their target of 80,000 coins per die pair. But it did take them a while to do that. They had to do some minor tweaking of designs and production methods to get there, but they got there. So in this short period of time, 41 die pairs, some are common, some are extremely rare. And the total manage of the 1878 tail feather dollars is about $1.25 million. The Red Book says it's 750,000, but that's wrong. There's significantly more than what the Red Book says. So these engraved feathers, I touched on them earlier with that one that I was talking about, where they engraved these little feathers underneath the wings. They all have different patterns because they were done by hand, they were done by punch. It was the engraver, add some feathers here, add some here. So they have different shapes, different sizes, different lengths. So these are three of the reverses that were used, and you can just get us seeing, a feeling for seeing what the different appearances of these engraved feathers is. The one that is most interesting to a lot of collectors is the VAM 9. That's the first Morgan dollar that was struck. And so we know what time of day it was struck because there were reporters in the room covering the ceremony to strike the first coins. The first coin struck was presented to President Hayes at the time. And that coin is at the Hayes Museum in Fremont, Ohio. And it was another silver dollar researcher, Pete Bishel, who specialized in silver dollars and heirs. He was a big heir dealer back then. He studied these coins and predicted that the VAM 9, this die pair, was the first one struck without seeing the coin that was struck for President Hayes. So in 1982, he and Leroy Van Allen drove from Cincinnati up to Fremont, Ohio, to the Hayes Museum in one of Leroy's restored sports cars, which was one of his other hobbies at the time. And they went there to look at this coin, and the curator had to go find it. And it wasn't on display anywhere. And so they found this coin in this box, stamp number 1. The coin was horribly cared for. It was polished, clean, scrubbed both sides, nasty looking thing, but it was the VAM 9. So it was correctly predicted to be VAM 9. There was a letter with the coin from the coiner, Oliver Bosbyshell, certifying that coin in the box labeled number 1 was the first coin struck and presented to the president. The feathers that were engraved on the VAM 9, these retouched feathers, are unique to this reverse die. So when you find an 8-tail feather Morgan dollar, first thing I do is I turn over and look at those feathers. If I see this pattern, I know it's VAM 9. I buy the coin. So there's 2 here, 3 here. There's good pictures of it available on Van World also. That's probably where I pulled this one from. This die was only used on VAM 9, and then later it was replaced with another die. The obverse die continued to be used for VAM 14, and then dies were swapped in and out for several weeks for the 8-tail feather design. There's one reverse die, which is called A1C reverse, and these names A1C refers to a shorthand for the hub design, a hub minor modification stage, and then enumerating those dies that were made with that hub. This reverse was used with 10 different obverses. So when they were chronicling all this die failure that was happening, they couldn't keep production going. That was while this die was in the press. It was used 10 different obverses. A few of them, 2 of them are common, VAM 3 and VAM 4. One of them not so common, VAM 5. The rest of them are rare or ultra rare. So kind of like the guy that was doing all the Thornhead collection, the 12 different die stages of one die pair for 1921S, you could make a nice collection out of all of the die pairs that used this reverse die for 1878. And 5 of them are extremely rare, and some of them might not be known in mint state. Or there's maybe only 1 or 2 known in mint state, but they're an AU coin for some of these is several $1,000s. So they can be expensive coins. If you cherry pick one and sell to someone who wants one, you'll make several $1,000s. So speaking of money, how do we value these things? The reality about VAMs is they're traded within a fairly thin market. There's not, I know who the guy is doing the Thorn headset. I know who the two people are trying to do the entire catalog, for whatever reason. And so there's not a lot of people participating in the market, but the popular ones, the top 100, and a lot of these 8-tail for the ones, they're more widely traded. You'll see a lot of sales on eBay. The Red Book contains some of the real popular ones. I think that tail bar variety for 1890cc, for example, is probably in the Red Book by now. All the overdates and overmint marks are there. And the other chase lists, like the top 100, the hot 50, a lot of those are starting to appear in the gray sheet. Also, Heritage and Great Collections are doing pretty well at holding sales that have a lot of VAMs in it. Heritage, I think once a quarter has basically a VAM auction. So there's coins I chase and that I don't get them because I get outbid by other people, and I'm not just outbid by one person, as there's several people working on these. So you can use these auction prices realized on Heritage, Great Collections, and on eBay to see what these are worth. You can use the gray sheet for some of them. Obviously, it's best to use actual transactions. There's also a price guide that the Society of Silver Dollar Collectors has on their website. It requires a membership in the SSDC. So that's another avenue for getting valuation. So what are the benefits of this? Well, I've been involved in doing this for a long time now. There's potential financial windfall for cherry picking varieties, and that's the case with any varieties. You hope to find a rare one. Is this a rare one? Is this a rare one? You get asked that all the time, and 9 times out of 10 you say this is common because that's what rare means. And so you could make some money on it. It's not easy, but you can. You eventually develop a good eye for detail looking at these things, and you learn a lot about the minting process. How do these things happen? And you can study how does die fall apart? Why do we have cracks here and not here? You can put together pieces of puzzles of how things were made, when these things happen, and then you can reconcile that with this paperwork that Roger pulls out of the National Archives, and it validates what you've assumed from looking at coins. You see things that match in the actual history of what happened. One real important thing now is that as you get used to what all these things look like, you can insulate yourself from buying counterfeit coins, and you can spot counterfeits from a mile away sometimes, just by looking at something that no one else is looking at. The counterfeiters that have been making, the Chinese counterfeiters that have been making a lot of these things, they don't know all the details that people who are closely studying these series know, and they'll put the wrong reverse with an obverse, and you'll see, this or they'll give you a 1901 CC Morgan dollar as that's obviously not real, but so is the 1881 reverse of 78. Well, I guess the wrong tail feather on it. That's not real either. So if you see these minor things and you start seeing how the details look, you can really insulate yourself from buying counterfeits. And you can create your own challenges for collecting too. I mean, you can make up your own sets. You can look to see what's if something's interesting. There's a lot of different types of varieties to look at. And you can build all sorts of sets, collect the kind of coins you want. You can learn stuff about other coin types as well by studying VAMs, because the production is similar across other types. So that's my sales pitch for VAM collecting here in a general introduction. If you're interested in a more than general introduction to this, I encourage you to sign up for the ANA Summer Seminar. This year, I'll be teaching, hopefully, the course on investing and collecting Morgan dollars, and we have lots of hands-on looking at different VAMs. We look at grading and other stuff as well for Morgan dollars. But we pass around a lot of cool coins. 4 days of learning just about anything you can imagine about Morgan dollars. So with that, I want to thank you for attending my talk, and I'll open up the floor to questions.
Give us just 1 second. We'll get set up for questions. All righty. All right, if you are watching online, you are welcome to send in questions. There is a Q&A button at the bottom of that Zoom window. You can click on that and send them in. I will read anything off anonymously, so you don't need to worry about that. So I'm going to open it up to the room first. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, so you got 5,000 VAMs in the catalog now. What do you think the theoretical next one is?
We're getting there. For 1921 alone, there are 21P. There are probably around 400. So if you start looking at the total production, you divide that by 130,000. Maybe that's what the limit is. And what that could tell us is that there's probably some that are in the catalog that are duplicates of others. We see records coming from the mint of which dyes were used, how many dyes were used, mint production records, not just how many dyes were shipped, because that doesn't tell us how many were used, but production records, that'll tell us how many there were. We have that information for a few days, but not very many. So yeah, if you take the entire Morgan dollar production, divide it by 130,000, maybe that's the theoretical limit, but I haven't done that math.
All right, we do have a couple online. Are new VAMs still being found, and how often?
Absolutely. Some of them are kind of boring, but some of them are pretty interesting. So one of the new VAMs that was found in January, Heritage was selling a specimen of the 1921 Zerbe proof, or 1921S Zerbe proof dollars. There's all sorts of stories around these Zerbe proofs. Technically they are not proofs, and the affiliation with Zerbe is somewhat tenuous, but there's this series of coins that were made that are very special looking coins. Heritage sold one of them at the January fund show, and I arranged with them to study the coin under a microscope during the show and take some photos of it, and identified markers on it that had not been seen before on business strike coins. So that coin was then cataloged in the VAM catalog as 1921S VAM 35. 2 months later, a collector found a business strike of that, and that was like super exciting for a lot of people, because I mean it hadn't been reported before. And so that coin, this specimen level coin that sold for $130,000, those dies were used also for business strikes, for regular business strikes. And I don't know what that business strike is going to be worth unless we could try selling someone else, but it's going to be for a lot more than what an MS61 1921 Morgan dollars were. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of other VAMs that are not terribly exciting that get added. In 2022, there were probably 200 to 300 modifications made to the VAM catalog. Not all those were VAMs being added. Some were things that are being clarified or modified. But there's some dates that are being studied more closely by collectors. And when that happens, they notice things that weren't noticed before, and then we can catalog things much more clearly than were being done in the past. So to answer your question, yes, more VAMs being discovered. Some of them are exciting, some of them aren't. The real exciting ones, most of them were discovered in the past, but there are still exciting ones being discovered.
All right, do we have any other questions from within the room? All right, we do have some more online. Theoretically, should every Morgan and Peace dollar have an assigned VAM number?
Yes. Because every Morgan and Peace dollar was struck by a specific pair of dies, it will have a VAM number. In some cases, it's not able to be determined what that VAM number is because of where. So on a lowball set, if someone sends me a lowball set for attribution, I'm going to say, yeah, no, I can't figure these out. For most of them, for some of them, I can. I have attributed a 1894 Philly VAM 3, which is the only business strike die pair used, that was in pour one because there was a specific die marker that was visible. Now that die marker being visible, not just more importantly than attributing it, it allowed it to be authenticated as a 94p Morgan dollar. So again, that's authenticating coins, seeing these die markers, knowing where they are, and being able to see them even on a low grade is important. So there's there is a VAM number for everything. Sometimes you don't know what it is.
All right. Which date and mint currently have the most VAMs assigned, and do you know how many?
Well, yeah, I mentioned earlier 1921P, simply because the production was so high. There was 45 million, I think, coins that they struck. There's hundreds of VAMs for 1921P. There's someone trying to collect them all, naturally, which is why we have so many. He's studying the series closely and he's seeing, yeah, this one's new, this one's new, this one's new. And the things that are new are basically retouching they did at the mint to fill in some areas of the die that hadn't been hubbed up correctly. So they added a whole bunch of detail, and some people like that. Most people don't care. The ones that are really exciting to have lots of VAMs in it are in 1878. So 1878 Philadelphia and San Francisco they both have lots of varieties, and most of them are interesting to look at compared with other ones. 1878 Carson City is much smaller mintage, but there's still a lot of varieties there, and it's a challenging series to put together. But we're talking maybe 20 varieties, but there's over 100 for Philadelphia and San Francisco that are cataloged.
All right. Then we don't have anything else on Zoom right now. So if you had any other questions, send them in now and we'll pick them back up at the end. Otherwise, anyone else in the room?
So the VAM site has all of these outlined.
Yeah, so if you go to vamworld.com, there's a discussion board there, and there's the wiki, which has all of the information about all VAMs that are cataloged. As I catalog new ones, the new pages get added to the wiki and new pictures get put up. Since it's a wiki, it's been populated by many collectors, so all that information is there on how to identify all these VAMs. So if you're interested in specific dates, just go to that date and start looking, and you'll see everything there.
All right. Anything else in the room? Nope. All righty. Okay. Then I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up. A reminder, I'm guessing everyone has heard by now, but all of these talks in this room are being recorded. They'll be uploaded to the NNP about 2 weeks from today now. So everyone who is registered for the symposium, which should be everyone watching online, you will get an email when those are up. There will also be an announcement on our website and social media. For those of you here in person, if you would like to receive an email when those go out, we invite you to register for the NNP Symposium. It is entirely free and takes about 2 minutes on your phone. The sign up here, as well as the one outside the door, have a QR code you can scan, as well as the URL to register. So that's going to wrap us up. Our next presentation is starting at 11:30 Central. I believe it is William Nyberg, correct? Yes, we got William Nyberg talking about Robert Scott and his engraving. So thank you all very much. Thank you so much for taking the time to present, and hope to see some of you back soon.